Lincoln A. Graham Jr.
And you pastor where?
Oneness Pentecostal Tabernacle in the heart of southeastern Queens in St. Albans, not too far from JFK Airport.
New York City.
New York City.
How long have you been a licensed minister with the United Pentecostal Church International?
Ooh, 24 years. 24 years.
So you and I am here in New York over the weekend, and we just got to talking and chatting, and I never realized that you were an eyewitness of the second plane hitting the tower on 9/11, 2001, that tragic day in the United States of America. And I want you to talk about that day again. It moved me very deeply. And just obviously what it did to you for so many years as well. We can get into that later, but your career credentials, what were you doing in that area? Just kind of tell us about your career. You were about 34 years old at the time.
Yes.
So just kind of tell us about your career credentials and lead us up to that moment, if you don't mind.
Yes, I was in wholesale banking.
Okay.
I managed large portfolios of derivative products. We had all kinds of fancy names to it because we didn't want people to know what derivatives were. Even then, in those days, people had negative connotations about derivatives. I never had any problems with it. They were a necessary toolkit to any financier. And of course, like any tool, you abuse it, things happen. And of course, this was way before 2007, 2008 with the market meltdowns that occurred.
Which is when you finally retired, was what year?
2003.
2003.
Yeah.
2 years after 9/11.
9/11 was the catalyst to getting me out of wholesale banking because I loved what I did. It was a part of my identity. And if it wasn't for the call of God on my life, I would have looked to do everything that I could to go up the food chain. I really liked what I was doing. I liked playing with numbers. I liked the ingenious ways that we could bring value out of things that were there, notionally or otherwise, ways that we could create solutions for making income. And my employers liked me, and I liked my employers. And I liked what I was doing a lot. So it would have been very difficult for me to get out of ministry. It would have been very hard for me to get out of ministry. But 9/11 was the beginning of that start for me of getting out, because by the time I came full circle to that particular crucible, I had just been burnt out. I had really lost all faith in the market. I really lost faith in my employers at that time and what I was doing, and I was really starting to second guess myself.
So how long were you working on Wall Street? You retired in 2003, and when did you start?
I started wholesale banking back in '93.
Wow. Okay.
Out of school.
So you've got about 10 years here. This is your day in, your day out, so to speak, at least 5 days during a week. What time did the planes hit? What time frame on that morning?
Oh, that is, it was definitely before 9 o'clock.
Before 9 o'clock.
Sometimes I try to block that out. I do know that once we get around 8:40 or so forth like that, I always instinctively begin to get very sober. So I guess it really happened around 8:40ish.
Take us back to that morning, if you don't mind. You wake up in the morning. What was your day like? And just kind of take us through that day, if you can.
Well, I think to really start talking about the morning, I always have to really talk about the day before.
Okay, let's do it.
Uh, it's the end of summer. Business is a little bit slow. And usually I'd be in the offices till about maybe 7:30, 7:45. That day was a kind of an early day. I was looking to pack up by 6 o'clock. Last thing that came across into my email box before I shut off my machine was a State Department communique. Our department always got State Department communiques when there was impending terrorist activities.
Would this be a common occurrence typically, or these State Department emails or messages?
That whole entire year we were getting them very regularly. And they were basically saying that we suspect that there is going to be some sort of terroristic activity. They kind of alluded to the fact that they didn't know which hemisphere. They were basically stating to us that if we were traveling, we should be very aware of our environment. We should make sufficient planning, whatever we're doing, if we were traveling for business or whatever, that we have proper avenues for escape, to move back away from whatever's happening and so forth like that. What is telling about that particular communique, it was the most strident.
The last one.
The last
September
one.
10th as you're packing
September 10th, around 5 something, almost 6 o'clock. It was the most strident. It had urgency in it. And once again, it didn't tell us where. And so it was basically saying, wherever you are going, whichever hemisphere you're in, have your head on a swivel. Be aware of your environment. Be cautious. Look for things that are out of the ordinary. And so that was the last thing that I saw that evening. And I kind of was looking forward for Tuesday. Around the beginning of fall, September every year, the various restaurants put on a food fair at the Twin Towers. And so it's always a kind of like a opportunity to take an extended lunch break, because most of the times when things are really running, you don't have time for lunch.
Yeah.
You just grab and eat right at your desk. So I was planning to take an extended lunch, go sample some of the bigger restaurants because they got their food tasting tables, just literally ringing the Twin Towers complex. And of course, the Twin Tower complex, it's just massive. You have the downstairs mall. It's a mass transit hub between New York City and New Jersey, and you've got some of the major train lines going north to south in Manhattan going through there. So there's a lot of stuff happening, and of course all the tourists going up and down, and the people who work in that complex. And for Oneness at that time, we had at least 24 people that worked in and around the complex.
Wow.
The various buildings, either the 1 or 2 towers, number 5, I remember we had a few saints in there, number 7. It was more than just the towers. There were smaller buildings around it. There were major financial houses that bracketed on each side. I had clients that were before on the east side of the building. I had clients that were on the west side. towers of the building. A lot of the money center banks were circling around the World Trade Center. And in those days, everything was centralized. All the major money center banks, they had their computer centers, they had their back offices, they had their front offices all in the same place. And so the ripple effect of any kinds of disruption would send disruption and ripple straight through the whole entire economy. But in those days, we didn't realize that, because even though several years earlier we had a smaller scale terroristic situation, interaction, that explosion that happened down into the basement, no one at that time would extrapolate that somebody would think about taking over airplanes, hijacking airplanes and running them into buildings. And of course, at that time, airplanes running into buildings in New York City wasn't foreign, but those were very small instances. The last really big one, an event probably after World War II or so, B-24 or something like that, ran into, I think it was Empire State Building. But, you know, every so often a little tiny plane might accidentally crash or something in Manhattan Island, but nothing like that. Nothing like that.
So take us to that day. You're looking forward to sampling these restaurants.
And a slow day.
Slow day.
A slow day.
Yeah.
Tuesdays, usually for me, the week is ramping up. All kinds of trades are coming in on Monday. We start the process of breaking out the transactions, setting up the transactions, because by Thursday we're going to be closing several $100 million worth of deals. All to just turn around by Friday and explode them again. So I was looking forward to that day, because it would be a slow day and it would be a slow transactional week.
Okay.
A very rare occurrence coming into the fourth quarter of the year.
Okay.
And so I didn't come in as early as I normally come in. Usually I would have been in by 7:30, 7 o'clock. I came in about 8 o'clock, and I was just slowly moving around, setting up, turning on my machines, looking over what I was doing, when I heard somebody shout out in the back of the office, plane went into the building.
So you're there for maybe 30 minutes at that time?
I was in there 30, 35 minutes, just sitting down with my breakfast. You know, you usually grab a bagel and get it all loaded out with some coffee.
Just like on the movies, right?
Exactly. And somebody shouted out. And when they shouted out, I was thinking, you know, it was a little plane, because you have a whole lot of seaplanes circle the island. You have a whole lot of helicopters, whether tourist or business, because we have a whole lot of helipads down there at the time. And I was like, okay, it's a small little plane. They didn't sound panicked. It was just, you know, a sound of concern. You know, they just shouted out with concern in their voice. And so I got up out of my desk and out of my cubicle, walked into the lunchroom, and I was just peering out, and I saw a little bit of smoke coming from the North Tower. Really couldn't see too much.
Are you standing in this room by yourself?
I'm standing by myself.
Okay.
There's nobody else. And the building that I worked out of, 61 Broadway, it has entrances on Broadway, and it has entrances on Church Street, which is now Trinity. So that area of the block is Trinity Place, because you have Trinity Church right at the corner of us. And so that street, Trinity Church, is the front street for the Twin Towers. Twin Towers sits on its east side on Church.
Okay.
So I'm pairing up, and the lunchroom is empty, and it's got nearly floor to ceiling windows, big old school windows, and our ceilings were like 11 feet, 10 feet, thereabouts. So it's a tall room. And I'm peering outside, and I see smoke, and it's getting stronger. And so I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. And I'm kind of making comments back to people who are still sitting at their desk and so forth like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I notice it's getting a little bit stronger. So I'm not panicked, but I have a little bit of concern. What kind of plane would have made so much smoke? Because the smoke is getting stronger. One of the things that you got to understand is that each floor of the tower is really big. North Tower and South Tower were really big complexes. Really big complexes. And it's at least about 100 acres. So all of a sudden I hear this roar, and it's getting louder. And it's this side of my head, I'm hearing this roar, right? And it's just incessant, and all of a sudden I kind of key in, and I'm kind of like looking around, and all of a sudden I saw a very large plane. And to this day I kind of locked out my brain what type it is. It's like I purposely don't want to know, which is saying a lot, because in New York City, planes go by all the time.
Yeah.
And we instinctively know by sight that's a Boeing, that is Airbus, that's a DC-10, 757, 737. We can, and since I grew up near Kennedy Airport, I could almost tell by sound and by that's that kind of plane, that's that kind of plane. But for me, I've purposefully kind of like locked out what that plane is. I just know that it was huge. And our offices were on the 15th floor, 61 Broadway. And I'm looking out on Church Trinity, and I swing my head, and I just saw it out of the corner of my eye. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, 6 Mississippi, 7 Mississippi, 8 Mississippi. Boom. And as it passed by my eye, it's like my brain just froze. I do remember that it was so close that I could read the small letters on the belly.
Wow.
And it swung down, and the right wing was kind of up a little bit, lower wing, as it swung this way. And I remember it speeding up. It came down on the curve, and it just started to speed up. And the only thing that I could remember is that the big explosion ball, the heat. I remember the distinct kind of feeling as the windows bowed in, bowed out. And
From the pressure.
From the pressure.
The
And
impact.
the
Wow.
noise, for some reason, my brain doesn't register the noise. I just know it's just loud. And it was the grace of God. I don't know why the window did not break, because if the window had broke, it would have just cut me up. because it's 9-10 feet worth of ceiling, and it was just a bank of glass from about hip high. And the other distinct thing that registered in my mind was that the side of the building just swallowed the plane. The whole thing from wingtip to wingtip it just went in. And I didn't even know how to call on Jesus. My brain shut down. I just shut it out. Crashed in the building, and I ran out. I didn't know what to do. I just ran out of the lunchroom, and I just hollered down the hallway, and there were people just working.
Still.
The noise didn't faze them. They were just still working. And I was a bank officer, and we had protocols for emergency. And I saw one or two of officers at my levels, bank officers at my level, my boss. I saw them, and I was like, I just conferred real quick because I knew what the process was. We were supposed to evacuate the floor, bring everybody downstairs, and we stand on the corner of Broadway and Wall Street, or Broadway and Exchange, whichever one. And everybody was just slow to move. People were just in slow.
Told them, guys, a plane just hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was such a big red hole, a big maw. And to me, it registered in my brain that this building's not going to stand. It can't stand up. It's not going to stand up. And if it falls, it's going to hit me where I'm at. So I quickly ran to my desk. On the way to my desk, I tried to go call my wife. And instantaneously, the phones weren't working because all the cell towers were on. I can't remember, it was the North Tower or the South Tower. One of the towers had all the cell phones, so there was no cell phone in those days. And of course, cell phones in those days are not cell phones like how they are right now.
Right.
You had a Palm Pilot, which didn't have a whole lot of power, so to speak. So I quickly went to my desk, hit the landline, called my wife. She was working from home at that time. And it immediately went to voicemail. I wasn't quite sure if the landlines were dying or not. I quickly tried to tell her, plane went into the building. I'm still alive. I don't know if what's happening with the tower. I don't have any phone service. I quickly tried to tell her that I don't think that the trains are going to be working. So I'm going to try to get off the island by boat, or if I'm going to try to walk, but I'm getting out. I'm not going to stay. And I'll call her as soon as I can again, but I'm still alive. And I just walked out. I wasn't going to listen to the protocols because everybody was going slow and people were still working. Some folks were waking up that this is serious, and they were heading out as well. And I took the emergency exit 3 steps, 4 steps at a time. And by the time I got down to the ground floor, there was pandemonium in the streets. Pandemonium. People were crying. The sky was snowing something.
This is about maybe 10 minutes after.
10 minutes.
Something, yeah.
It was about 10 minutes
Immediately
later.
it was pandemonium.
There was pandemonium. People were in cars, were trying to escape. People were in escape mode. I knew that people were dying. And in my mind, it wasn't a small amount. It was just a lot of people were dying. And it was snowing something. Ash. I don't know what it was. My brain wasn't registering it. It just knew that whatever was coming out the sky wasn't good. And
later we found out a lot of that were people. I don't know if at that moment, but yeah, you just remember things coming down.
Later on, I would discover that the floors that the plane went through, that last plane went through, killed a lot of my wife's ex-coworkers, friends.
Wow.
And to this day, I'm a little bit sober about it because the agency that she worked for had moved a lot of people who were in her building in Brooklyn, on the Brooklyn side, into that building that year. And most likely she would have been one of the people who had gotten moved to that building. But she had a lot of friends that lost their lives that day. A lot of her friends, good friends. People that she had witnessed to.
Wow.
People that she had prayed for. You know, and process of being a co-worker and being concerned about them.
Yeah.
That sort of stuff. So that was a double gut because I knew them as well because, you know, she introduced me to them. But once I got down on the ground and I saw the pandemonium, I knew that I couldn't run up Broadway. It was too close. So I made up in my mind that I gotta go run as far east as I can. So I took off. I was just running as fast as I could up Wall Street. I just took off up Wall Street, and I took Wall Street till I got to the Riverside Pier 23 Mall, and I started to walk as fast as I can. And I could hear the bedlam, I could hear the noise, it was just a whole lot of humanity. And I was trying to walk with my head down because every so often I'd kind of look up and I'd see things coming off the building, and I knew that some of it was people and I knew some of it was a whole lot of other stuff. And my mind had just shut down. I was just in survival mode. And by the time I was walking up past Pier 23, I came to the Brooklyn Bridge, and police were, they were trying to get people to go up north as fast as they can, move away, move north. So they're pushing everybody, telling them, keep moving. But I saw some people run across the street and up a flight of stairs that I never knew was there in the Brooklyn Bridge. I never knew that there were steps. And I saw them, and I didn't think it through. It's like, if people are taking steps, that means that they can get up to the bridge. And I just wanted to get off the island because I didn't know what else was going to happen.
Yeah.
It hadn't even registered to me yet that it was terrorists. It didn't register. So this woman cop, I begged her, please, let me. She said, I'm going to turn around. You do what you got to do. And as soon as she did, I just took off. Ran up the steps 2, 3 at a time. And when I got up to the top, I can see the North Tower and the South Tower more clearly because it's just in front of you like this. You can't miss it because you're almost at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge on the Manhattan side. And you're up in the air, so you can see a whole lot more of it. There were people who were panicked. There were a lot of people, first responders, that they were running. And I guess they couldn't get a car, or things were blocked off and they couldn't get that way.
They were trying to run
They were
the Twin
running
Towers.
towards.
Wow.
I mean, they were running with all their strength.
Wow.
They were not looking around. They were just running. And I remember some people, they were panicked. They had jumped off of the bridge boardwalk onto the car tarmac going this way. And it was like they were trying to jump into cars or just take over cars. They were just panicked. They just wanted to go as fast as possible. But there was no way for the vehicles to go because everything was just bumper to bumper. Mm. And I remember other people, a whole bunch of people on the bridge boardwalk helping other people, carrying people, pushing people. Some folks had already, they're already sobbing, crying on the ground. And I had gotten the sense that people were on the verge of just losing it. Mm-hmm. And at that moment, I saw this white woman. She was a J.P. Morgan employee. It was her first time back in the office for the whole entire summer. She had back surgery. And she was panicked, and I said, "You all right?" I said, "Let's stick together." I don't even remember her name. And so we were together, and we were kind of closer to the fence that divides the walkway from the lower car path. And we kind of just stayed close together. I don't remember if we held each other's arms or what, but there was just this sense that people were on the edge of panic, because at the same time there were sonic booms going by, and some of us initially we thought, oh my God, it's another. It is at that moment where it was like, we're under attack. Mm. It's terrorism. It's a terroristic attack. And we're hearing sonic booms going back and forth, and we were thinking it's another plane coming after us. And in my mind is like, they're coming after the bridge. I don't know why my brain thought that, but that's what it thought. And at that time, that's when people started to kind of like panic. And I was kind of like getting concerned that there would be a stampede, and I was starting to get afraid that we'd get hurt in a stampede.
Jesus.
And somehow we just, all right, let's keep moving. And both of us were not trying to look back. But then at that moment, I don't think we moved more than 30 feet. There was this sound. It just sounded like thunder, just before a big giant storm. Just it was as loud as that second plane. And we both turned around kind of at the same time, because up to that point we were trying not to look, because it was just looking uglier. And when we looked, and I really don't know which tower it is, but it just kind of like went like this. Mm. It was that fast. You just saw it sway, and you heard loud noises, and it just, and I'm a person of faith, but my spirituality just shut down. I didn't know how to call on Jesus at that moment. I did not know how to call on Jesus at all. And in that moment, I was so numb because when it disappeared, the building just disappeared. All you could see through all the side streets of Lower Manhattan, Maiden Lane, and all those lanes that just checkered out the financial, you just saw, it looked like the volcanic ash, pyroclastic flow, flowed through every street. And I wasn't quite sure if it pancaked down or fell over sideways. Or it just disappeared. And I just thought, oh, my coworkers are dead. Because not too many of them had left with me. I was like, they're dead. And I thought that everybody that was south of the building was dead. And so we're like wooden chickens. We just turned back around and we just walked as fast as we could. Walking across the bridge was a blur. That was the first time in my life I'd ever walked across the Brooklyn Bridge. I knew it was up there. I never walked it. And it was a blur. It was just the sonic booms. Sonic booms. I was dull. I was just deadened to the sonic booms by that time.
Wow.
And when I and that lady got to the other side, we saw a pizza shop over across to the left. And it wasn't like we were hungry, but our throats were just dry. I don't think we were thirsty either. There was this dryness in our mouth. So we just went and we ordered 2 bottles. I don't even know who paid for it. And I couldn't even drink. I wanted to drink, but I couldn't drink. And it was at that moment that I started to see the people who you see in the pictures at that day that were covered in white ash or whatever it was. That's when I started to see them come over. Saw them starting to walk across. There's a iconoclastic picture of a black lady covered from head to toe in soot. I believe I saw her pass by me that day. I believe I saw her. But there was just so many people. And there was just so much noise. You just heard the grief. Heard people crying out. The sonic booms. People running towards. People running from. Around that time, I discovered that the lady that I was walking with, she lived in downtown Brooklyn, not too far from the high school that I went to. So we walked down to her street. She didn't know me from Adam. She was concerned for her husband because she knew that he was on a C train coming northbound to the tower. And she lost contact with him. She couldn't get him. She was concerned about him. I was concerned that I couldn't get a hold of my wife. She was working from home. And she said that she'd allow me to use her phone. She didn't know me from Adam. She let me into her apartment. She was trying to call her husband, still trying to, from her landline, still couldn't get him. I had collapsed on her floor by the window, kind of looking out back towards the towers where, by that time I'd heard that another building had dropped. The only thing I could do was groan. At that moment was one time I could say I couldn't feel God. I was just collapsed on my knees by the window, really not trying to look out. And as we to give you an idea of the kind of shock that people were in, before we got to our apartment, which was no more than 5 blocks or 4 blocks from the bridge, there were several people that we passed collapsed on the ground, crying out, bawling. And I was just dimly aware of them. I didn't even have enough capacity to deal with myself to even comfort them. Mm-hmm. The only thing that I could register is that they knew that somebody, some loved one that they cared for had died. They were just Jesus. On the ground, middle of Brooklyn Street, just bawling. Men and women bawling. This lady lived in a brownstone walk-up, 2nd floor for a brownstone walk-up. And got a hold of Marie, got a hold of my wife, told her, lady was gracious enough to let me in. She was trying to contact different people that she knew that worked in and around, and we had lots of saints. So I gave her the address. The lady allowed me to give her address to my wife. My wife was going to try to get those people to get to her house. And so from 10 o'clock, people were trickling in. I mean, we had a whole bunch of church folk, and they had their friends.
Wow.
It was definitely over 24 people.
Did she ever get in touch with her husband, the lady?
Yes. Several hours later, he got out of the train system. I don't remember how he got out. Because when the Twin Towers fell, it severed a whole lot of power lines. A whole lot of trains went dead. And the odd thing about that particular day, you would have thought that there would have been people who would have immediately looked to rendezvous, get off the island. There were people still working. We waited at this woman's house till sometime around 3:30, closer to 4 o'clock, before the last straggler came in. This one woman, she was a paralegal for some big name law firm, partner. She insisted on she finish her work. She finished it. She worked with one of our saints, one of the big law firms.
So we're talking 7 hours approximately.
Yeah. And the irony of it is, by the next week she was out of a job. I mean, business had shut down. A lot of firms had shut down.
Wow.
So Sister Marie arranged for some of our men to get cars. And I don't know how they snuck around the quarantine, because there was state of emergency. The whole downtown Brooklyn was shut down. And they snuck the cars in through the quarantine and got to her house. And we moved out about 24 people in about 3 cars.
What was that, before we take the exit from her home, what was that moment like for you to see the saints that you had gone to church with, to see them alive, most of them?
There was just this relief.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I started to hear later up in the evening that they can't find Brother Vaswald. But I wasn't panicked about it because he didn't work in the Trade Center. he had a business where he delivered financial documents and legal documents to large firms in that area. And he was supposed to have been in and out of that area from 7 o'clock because his day starts around 5 o'clock. But we had a large event at his house the Sunday, and I don't know if it was a little bit hangover from, we had a big giant barbecue, so forth and so on from the day prior, from Sunday, and it's Tuesday. But somehow he was a little bit slow for that day. We had another sister. She should have been in building 5. And for some reason, when she woke up that morning, she said she had problems getting her shoes on. She couldn't, for the life of her, get her shoes on. And so she missed the train that she would have been on. So when she was getting out of the subway station, the building was hit the second time.
Wow.
And she just scurried back down and got away. Got away from the area.
Wow. So that afternoon, they pile up people in the cars that your wife had sent.
Yeah, we had about 2-3 cars, and we had about 24 plus people.
Packed in like sardines.
We packed them in like sardines. We were packed in like sardines. And I don't exactly remember how we got back out of the cordon, but I do remember when we got on the highways. There was nobody.
And in New York, for context, people watching all over the world, I mean, I'm in New York. I'm from the South. We got traffic, but we don't have traffic like New York.
Traffic never stops.
Even millions
Traffic
and millions of
never
people
stops.
in this close proximity. So for you to say that nobody was on the road is a huge deal.
It was eerie.
You've been in New York all your life. How many times can you count that nobody was on the road?
It was eerie because by this time there was a degree of silence. I was trying not to turn on any radio and hearing all that bad news. I was in shock already. I didn't want to pile. But there were no airplanes. I had never been in a situation in New York where there were never, ever airplanes.
Yeah.
There are always layers of airplanes at different altitudes going through our airspace, and you're always the noise.
Yeah.
There was none,
Wow.
and there were no people. And the only time I had ever heard such silence and no traffic anywhere was when COVID hit us in 2020. It had passed through my mind those strangest thought. It would be like if the rapture took everybody.
Wow.
There were no cars anywhere. And what would have usually been an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and a half to drive the 15 miles from downtown Brooklyn to my house in the middle of Nassau County took no more than 25 minutes. I was a basket case by the time I got home. My wife, she was a basket case.
What time did you get home approximately that night?
I got home sometime around 6:20. We dropped off a whole lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
When you finally get home, what happens? What do you do? What's one of the first things you do? I'm sure hug your wife or
I hugged my wife.
Yeah.
Hugged my kids. They were young, 4 and 2, 5 and 3, somewhere around there. I wasn't the last person in the car. We brought some other folks. I was going to go take those people the last leg to their houses because they were 2 or 3 towns away from me. And we packed up our minivan, and we were going to go drop off the last 2 or 3 people so that the brothers from Brooklyn and Queens could go home. And we had the kids in the caravan and whoever else, the 2 or 3 people. And we started driving away from our house. And I only got about a quarter mile, and 2 white gentlemen still in their suits flagged us down. It's like, can you help us? We walked all the way from Brooklyn. It's like, you did? I just got back home, but folks took me and so forth like that, and they asked if I could drop them Wanta and Belmore. I said, no problem. And at that time, I wanted to drop them at their houses. They said, no, just drop us on Sunrise Highway and so forth like that, and we'll get home. They had walked all the way, and it took them up till almost 7 o'clock.
Wow.
It was starting to get dark. It was starting evening. Sun was starting to come down. And there was this pallor. There was this dark pallor. You could see this ashy black cloud to the east.
Wow.
And you could smell the smell. There was a little bit of that smell. It wasn't really strong, but it was in the air. So I dropped people home, came home. I was in a shock. Really couldn't eat. I was a basket case. I don't even know how I slept that night. I don't think I slept. I got up pretty early Wednesday, but I wasn't doing much. I was just basically in the bed, just kind of like hugging myself. I had my knees to my chest, and I was just kind of like just hugging myself. And early morning, my employer, headquarters, somebody from headquarters in Boston called, said that they needed me to prepare an overnight bag next morning, 7 o'clock. A car service was going to pick me up, and they were going to drive me up to Hartford. We had an office in Hartford, and then we were going to go work from Hartford to go set back up our shop.
At that moment, what's going through your mind as many people are trying to proceed as normal?
I was shocked because the individual didn't even ask, how are you doing? How are you feeling? It's just a matter of fact, business as usual. And it left a very salty taste in my mouth. I was not happy. Got through the day. I don't know how I slept because I wasn't sleeping. I don't know.
Because you had seen the plane.
Yeah.
I mean, many of us have seen it on television, but you, with your own 2 eyes in person, saw the plane. Not only that, you saw the aftermath. You saw the people jumping out of buildings. You were in the midst of the pandemonium. Yeah. So the PTSD.
I was just numb. The only thing that was registering my mind, because I was getting news back, can't find Brother Vaswell. Can't find Brother Vaswell. So, we got different theories going. His coworker got out, but maybe, he was in the subways system. He was deep under. And, we were kind of reassuring ourselves, because the basements, the multiple sub-basements is deep. And, we're thinking at that time, because we knew it pancaked down, okay, anybody that's in the basement has to have survived in some shape or way. We didn't even really know yet. And people are just scrambling around in the congregation. Everybody's numb in the congregation. Thursday morning, bright and early, get a car service. Drives me up to 2.5 hours. We're jumping the bridges, Triborough Bridge, and the pallor over the city. It's just a dark mushroom cloud. and you couldn't get away from the stench. The stench was just strong. The smell was just strong. And 2.5 hours later, somewhere around 10 something, arrive at our hotel. Hotel is right beside our Hartford offices. Drop my bag, go upstairs. Everything is dead. The plumbing work for financial services, if you're going to move securities in any big giant bulk, meaningful bulk, it really has to flow through the depository trust company. They were on the east side. And honest to God, if they had hit that building, the country would have been really in trouble, because everybody in that building is an expert in moving something, some sort of financial service. That's all. And in those days, we don't have computer systems, and every computer system was down there. So you would have knocked out the whole entire plumbing work on how we move monies. I spent the whole entire day trying to find people, find out who's alive at DTC, and in those days, what we were trying to do downtown, companies were going to their local Radio Shack, buying out every spool of telephone wire. We were trying to connect telephone wires from building to building. Folks at Depository Trust Company, they had been moved over to the Brooklyn side in the warehouses under the Brooklyn Bridge, and they were spending the whole entire day trying to put together any kind of phone system. I had a large block of securities that were supposed to move the day Friday. I didn't think that they were going to move. But miraculously, somehow, I don't know, by the end of the day, I had gotten instructions out. I couldn't move it through DTC, so we moved it through the Fed system. And it was only one measly trade. But I had to break it up into blocks of 49,999,000, because you can't, in those days, I don't know about now. I've left the business so long ago, but in those days, 49,999,000 was what you could move through the Fed system, and I had to go do multiple trades of that. And that evening was very hard. I was away from my wife and my kids. We were shell-shocked. We were all numb. Our employees were angry just as we were. All of the officers, we were mad.
Did all of your coworkers get out in time? The ones that
yeah.
were, okay.
Yeah. We decided to go to Ruth Chris restaurant, and we went there with the idea that we were just going to just burn out our corporate cards just to kind of get back at the company. Whoever had the bright idea to send us up there so quick. And we got to the restaurant. There was hardly anybody there. It was nobody there. We were really the only people there. Everybody looked at the menu, couldn't order. If we ordered, we didn't eat. And we just slowly just made our way back to our room. Called my wife, talked a little bit. I couldn't sleep. Made it through Friday. Friday afternoon, they gave me a car service back down. And I needed that because I was emotionally fragile.
What was so hard for you? What was one of the hardest things that was emotionally taxing for you?
Mind you, I'm a newly minted pastor. I'd only been in the saddle as a pastor for 9 months. December the year prior, I stepped into that role. There was nobody that I could really talk to. My father and mother, who were the senior pastors at that time, the founding pastors of Oneness Pentecostal Tabernacle, they were in Nigeria. And in those days, it was hard to get a phone call. I mean, nowadays you can pick up your cell phone, and most cases you can just call directly. You got the right plan, you just call directly. In those days, you need a satellite phone. And if you don't need to have a satellite phone, you need to have somebody with a special landline, and you got to arrange for people to be at the same place at the same time. They had gotten word to me, they were praying for you, keep your head together, so forth like that. That Sunday was hard for the whole entire church. Because by that time, we knew something was really wrong. We couldn't find Brother Vaswell. We didn't know where he is. His wife was trying to call his phone. We were just going through conjectures. I had to preach that day. I didn't have any connection with God that Sunday.
You're a 34-year-old man, been married maybe 5 years, 2 small children, pastoring for 9 months, and then 9/11 hits. Your parents are out of the country. And not only as a pastor, but personally, you witnessing this happen, and you've got to carry all of this.
I'm empty. I think I have my notes from that day. I've never looked at them. In my head, whatever I said had to be nonsensical, had to be stupidness. I have not to this day looked at those notes.
Wow.
I don't want to even look at them.
Wow. We were in the car yesterday. Your wife said, I remember exactly what you preached, not the Sunday after, but the Sunday prior.
Oh,
She
yeah.
mentioned about anxiety. What was the title?
High anxiety.
You preached high anxiety the Sunday before 9/11.
High anxiety.
2 days before the event.
2 days before.
And who would know that high anxiety would hit the nation, in many ways the world.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we were a shell-shocked church. Shell-shocked doesn't describe it. Because that same fall, there was a large airplane that left Kennedy Airport and crashed in Queens. And it kind of like brought everybody back to a bad place again.
How long after 9/11 approximately are we talking? Because I'm not aware.
That plane crash,
Few months?
just a few short months.
Wow.
And it just wiped out a whole entire neighborhood.
Just the accident this time.
Yeah. I was a hot mess going to General Conference. Because where the stadium that they had it at was right beside the airport. And every time a plane took off, I was in duck and roll. I was just in panic mode. I don't know how I survived. I was a basket case when I came back. After that, I went to BOT. I was still a basket case. I remember as part of one of the presentations, they showed that tower.
And because of the time.
Yeah, and I was all the way up into the right side bleachers. And when they did it, my brain just blanked, and almost like I started hyperventilating. I went into panic mode. I had to leave the building. I mean, it was just bad. It was years before I could really talk about it. I had for several years a cough that I couldn't get rid of. It was just like something just caught right here. It's the grace of God I got out as fast as I did, because anybody that was in that cloud died within 2 or 3 years. The bulk of them died for 2 or 3 years.
Cancers and
Yes.
things of that. Wow.
I had dark spots on this lobe, this left lobe. Part of it exacerbated by pneumonia, bronchitis. It was a high-stress job I was in. And so I was always susceptible to pneumonia and bronchitis and so forth. 9/11 didn't make it easier. It was till 2017 about where this left lung lobe cleared out. My doctor said, you don't have any more spots on that.
Wow.
So that was 17, 18 years.
Wow.
To this day, I'm still registered if anything happens with the 9/11 fund and with their cancer stuff. Because it's the grace of God. It's the grace of God I'm still here. So it was a crucible. It was a crucible. People voted me in 2000 last week in November, Thanksgiving. But I guess in a lot of minds, I wasn't their pastor until we got through 9/11 together. 9/11 made us, and in a lot of ways, it put us on a different trajectory. We really started to grow. We started to grow by leaps and bounds. And it helped cut the strings to Wall Street, because a lot of my identity was forged in wholesale banking. I really liked and it would have been very difficult for me to just walk out in faith. But after that, I couldn't do it anymore. I lost the love of it. I lost the taste for the excitement of doing numbers and crafting financial securities. As a sponge, it wasn't enough for me to know my job. I wanted to know my boss's job. I wanted to know my client's job. I wanted to know the industry inside and out. You know, I lost the love for it. And it helped start fixing in my mind that this is not where God called you to.
You mentioned something yesterday I thought was still think is very interesting. You said for about 4 months, people put their guards down.
Yeah.
And I mean, the churches were packed. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Church was packed. People that never went to church showed up in church. We came back from Hartford first week in November. I didn't want to come back. The fires were still burning. I didn't want to come back. I had employees that refused. They quit. It's like, I'm not coming back. I had clients. They packed up their shop, moved to Jersey. And that's why the Jersey side is as built up. The Jersey side was never as built up like you see it now. You see that big giant skyline around where Lower Manhattan is. That started after, because a whole lot of companies said, we're not putting all of our marbles in one basket anymore. So we came back. And the stench, the smell. It really, and I just got angry all over again. It was just a stench. Some of our clients were back. Some of them, it was like, we're not coming back. So there was really no need for them to put us downtown, because they had offices uptown. So I was angry. I remember first day back, early morning, got in around 8 o'clock.
How long
thereabouts.
ago, how long after is this approximately after 9/11?
December.
Wow.
First day back in the area. The fires are still burning. It still smells. When I stand at that same lunch window looking down, there was a garage, a big giant garage, four level, 4-story or 5-level garage. Now they're building some mega multi-tower in that area, but there are a whole lot of cars that were parked there, and they were covered in a thick layer of soot. You could barely tell what kind of cars they were because of the layers. So it was just car shapes.
Wow.
Because of whatever it was. So I knew instinctively that the owners were gone.
Wow.
They had died in an explosion. They had died, whatever. And so I looked down, and afterwards I decided, let me go get, a good old New York breakfast, a bagel with bacon and cheese. You got to have a bagel breakfast. So I go down to the deli on the ground floor on the Church Street side of our 61 Broadway. And I noticed instinctively people that I'd never talked to in that deli. And our delis, you got hundreds of people coming in. We've got delis that are like small supermarkets. So you got hundreds of people flowing in and out in any moment. This time there was only a trickle of people. And all of a sudden, for the very first time, I noticed people. Before it was just crowds and crowds and crowds of people. You're in multiple checkout lines with your orders, kind of thing. And we're nodding. You're alive, right? You're good. It's good seeing you. And
That's profound.
yeah. And it was like 3 or 4 months of that. People like, you good. You're still here. You're alive. It was like we were just appreciating the fact that we saw somebody that we may have just glimpsed or just recognized in passing. New Yorkers are very friendly people.
Yeah.
But because there's a lot of us and people are always trying to do shady things, we keep our guards up. We got to know you before we let down our guards.
Yeah.
But in that moment, all of New York, we just let down our guards.
Wow.
We were willing to eye contact. You're a New Yorker. You don't make eye contact unless you want to talk to somebody. You keep your eyes in your own zone, in your own boundary level.
Yeah.
You don't make eye contact. We were making eye contact with people. I don't know if I made lunch. I had to stay in the building because there was just a stench. There was no place to go outside. And life got very, very simple.
Yeah.
People were willing to look beyond all the baggage that we were carrying.
Yeah.
And we were willing to embrace each other for our humanity in that moment.
And how does this season affect you even to this day personally?
I think I get a little bit more depressed. I want September to be gone. And I think it's the same thing for a lot of the people in the congregation. Especially those of that generation that bore the brunt of it. You know, our new converts who came prior to that, they have their different ways of doing it. But for all of us, it was a glue.
Yeah.
But we don't want to remember that week.
Yeah.
And I think all of us kind of close in on ourselves. We get a little bit introspective. It was very difficult being in crowds. I'm an introvert already, but being in large crowds was frightening. Going to restaurants was terrifying. I instinctively looked for big walls. I tried to stay away from windows. I wouldn't go into a room more than 2 minutes without knowing where the exit is. I wanted to know if there was an explosion, how far I was from an exit. I instinctively prepared to run. And I guess for a lot of years I was kind of like into a flight mode. Large sounds unraveled me. Doesn't matter what kind of book drop on the ground, I just fall apart. It took me several years to even start talking about it. Years before I could even tell bits and pieces. And I think to this day, my brain finds a way to kind of protect me because I know I saw a lot, but my brain refuses to describe what I saw falling from the buildings.
Jesus.
So,
wow.
I'm in a better place now.
Yeah.
I'm in a better place.
Thank
But
you.
it punches us in the gut.
Yeah. Again, thank you for sharing this. What's one final message of hope you would like to leave to not only the fellow New Yorkers and people who lost loved ones that day, but what could you say to the nation watching as someone who went through that event, came through it on the other side?
You know, that's a little bit difficult. Because I still get angry about how it happened. It didn't have to happen. A whole entire year of State Department communiques, something bad is going to happen. And somehow we didn't connect what we were supposed to connect. We dropped the ball and a lot of people died. So the only thing I can say is living through it is a testimony that we are a whole lot more resilient. We are very resilient. We can go through bad things and don't break. We can bend but don't fall over.
That's powerful.
As Americans, as New Yorkers, we know how to get up. And even more importantly, I think, by the grace of God,
Amen.
we know how to thrive.
Amen.
Can get a hole just busted through us, and by the grace of God, we just know how to thrive.
Amen.
And so that's a God thing.
Amen.
That's a God thing.
Pastor Graham, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've been excellent, sir. Prince
well,
of
thank
Emmanuel,
you.
gentlemen.
I've never spoken to this detail. I've never been able to get this much out of me. It's still uncomfortable in a lot of ways to talk about.
That's right. Well, it moved me in that back seat as you just begin to, I don't even know how we got on it, but I didn't know that was your experience, and I was so moved. And I want people watching to be just as moved and compassionate and inspired, as you just said, the resilient. So hope this blesses somebody, and thank you all for watching.
Thank you.